Today I'm going to be talking about how the context of one's physical environment can influence the content of our thoughts. I'm going to be starting out by briefly covering the prior research that shows the benefits of nature and explain why we are interested in how the natural environment can affect patterns of thought. I'll then talk about the TKF Foundation model for parks that are included in our studies. I'll be covering two connected studies. The first is an ecological study examining what people tend to think about when visiting urban parks and how these thoughts are correlated with visual features of the parks. And the second is an experimental study where we manipulated those visual features to test their causality in thinking about the topics that they were correlated with. So prior research has shown that the natural environment can improve cognitive functioning, physical health, both perceived and actual, mood, and other measures of mental health. One of the mental health benefits seen is that short exposures to nature are associated with decreased rumination, which suggests that the physical environment can affect the specific thoughts that someone is having. Additionally, research done in a Chicago public housing project showed that children with better nature views out their window had better impulse control and delay of gratification. In addition to the physical environment, what people spend their time thinking about has various effects on mood and health. Mind-wandering research has shown that people whose thoughts are off-topic are less happy than those whose thoughts are on-topic. In contrast, thinking and writing about specific events and your emotional response to them through an expressive writing paradigm can improve physical and mental health. And additionally, writing about good things that happen every day has been associated with decreased depressive symptoms. So what we wanted to investigate was how the physical features of the environment can alter thought content to see if these results could help shed light on the mental health benefits of exposure to natural environments. The TKF Foundation is a nonprofit whose mission is to create urban spaces that encourage spiritual connections to nature. They work with communities to design and build publicly accessible urban green spaces, which has led to the creation of over 125 city parks. They're mostly in the mid-Atlantic area of the United States. These parks are different from other urban parks in that elements of the park are specifically included to encourage contemplation and rest. Each of the parks have a special bench with a journal that visitors are encouraged to write in, and this is the source of our data. These are pictures of 4 of the parks that were included in our analysis. And even though they all share the themes and values of the foundation, you can see the wide variety of design choices based on the size of the park and the surrounding location. While the parks were designed with semantic features to encourage reflection, we're also interested in the low-level visual features that determine what the parks look like. These visual features make up the color and spatial properties and may be important for some of the restorative effects of the environment. We're focusing here on the spatial property of non-straight edges, which is the density of non-straight or broken edges normalized to the number of pixels in an image. Other low-level visual features include hue, saturation, and brightness, as well as spatial features of straight edges and entropy. In these images, you can see how the straight edges and non-straight edges have been classified. The bright green and bright purple are the more salient edges, while dark green and dark purple are less salient, with green being non-straight and purple being straight edges. We chose to look at non-straight edges due to prior research in our lab and other labs, showing that they may have a particularly interesting influence on various types of cognition. For example, people prefer objects with curved edges over straight edges, and people also judge curved and angular paths as more organic and engaging than straight paths. So in this study, we analyzed over 10,000 journal entries written by visitors to 33 TKF Foundation parks to model the topics that people are thinking about while visiting these parks. This takes advantage of real-time impressions parkgoers are forming instead of relying on recall or mental reconstruction. After modeling the topics in the journal entries, we looked at the correlations between topics and visual features of the park. We have 3 pictures for each park to get a representative sample of its visual features. Non-straight edges were quantified in MATLAB, while perceived naturalness was rated by participants in a separate study who were just shown images of the parks. We use latent Dirichlet allocation for our topic modeling, which allows us to estimate the probable topic structure for a collection of documents or text entries. Each entry then is comprised of several topics, and a topic is essentially a list of semantically coherent and co-occurring words. Our topic modeling analysis resulted in a 10-topic model, and this graph shows the prevalence of each of these topics across all of the entries. The word clouds show the top 10 words that comprise that topic. The most common topic, appearing in about 22% of the entries, was religion. I'd like to point out that 14 of our 33 parks were located at a church or a hospital, which likely contributed to the high number of religious sentiments. The park topic was the next most common, appearing in about 18% of the journal entries. The labels for the topics, which are shown on the x-axis, were assigned based on the results of a separate online study where we showed participants these word clouds and asked them to give a label that best described the group of words. We then gave the clouds an objective label based on those common responses, selecting multiple words if needed for clarity and nuance. Overall, you can see that the topics convey that people are generally positive and contemplative about their life, their families, and their surroundings. I'd like to show a couple of examples of these journal entries. So in addition to the prevalence of each topic throughout the entire corpus, each journal entry is assigned weights for the topics, and that's the document topic weight. Here's an entry that has been mostly assigned to the spiritual and life journey topic. They write, "A cold day, hard to write, but I've been thinking often of the labyrinth and felt it calling me. This is very much a time of new beginning and going forward into the unknown and letting go of the old. I call forth a spirit of adventure and summon my visions of faith. My meditation, go forth in joy, look back in peace." And this was written at the Govans Presbyterian Church Park. So it was 71% spiritual and life journey, but it's also been assigned to the topics of life and memories, and time and memories, and life and emotion. And a second example that's mostly been assigned to the nature topic, but also world and peace and park. They write, "Gray and green, a moss green, the subtle colors of a winterscape in Maryland. A hint of sun warms this gentle weather day. Barely a breath of breeze rustles the dead leaves of the oak. The last vestiges of summer pass, clinging tenaciously to their branches. The amazing quiet allows me to hear the subtle sounds. There's goodness or places where nature is safeguarded from many." So after we had completed topic modeling, we calculated correlations between the visual features of naturalness and non-straight edges from the park images with their average document topic weights for the journal entries. We found that the non-straight edges positively correlated with the topic of spiritual and life journey. And additionally, and not surprisingly, perceived naturalness correlated with the nature topic. There were no other correlations that were significant at our Holm-Bonferroni adjusted p-value. Guided by these correlations, we then wanted to test whether the visual features had a causal role for the frequency with which people thought about the topics of spiritual and life journey and nature under more generalized conditions. So in order to test for the causal role of non-straight edges and naturalness on these topics, we ran an online study in which we showed participants images from 4 groups that varied on naturalness and non-straight edges, and these are example images from each of the 4 groups. Since naturalness and non-straight edges are normally correlated, this 2x2 design allows us to see independent effects of naturalness and non-straight edges, as well as interactions. We also chose to include images from a much wider range of environments, as opposed to only urban parks that were used in the first study, to ensure that our results weren't idiosyncratic to one environment type. For each image, participants were given a forced choice task in which they were asked to pick which of the topic word clouds best went with the image. And this is an example of the screen the participants would have seen. We use mixed logistic regression models to predict the topics of nature and spiritual and life journey using naturalness and non-straight edges. As predicted by the correlations, participants were twice as likely to pick nature for images with high naturalness versus low naturalness. Also in line with our predictions, participants were 1.6 times as likely to pick spiritual and life journey for images with high non-straight edges compared to low non-straight edges. There was a significant interaction such that for both topics, they were chosen most often for images that were high in both non-straight edges and naturalness. By replicating our ecological findings and extending them to a wider range of environments, we see that similar cues may be being used to reflect on one's surroundings. In conclusion, increasing exposure to non-straight edges can increase reflections about spirituality. Urban parks may be a location that encourage thoughtful, positive reflection about one's surroundings, relationships, and the world. And small urban parks could be a modest community investment that provide residents a place for connection and restorative experiences. And due to the influence of low-level visual features, they should be taken into account for a design space to achieve its purpose. I'd like to acknowledge my advisor, Mark Berman, as well as all of my co-authors, members of the Environmental Neuroscience Lab, the TKF Foundation, NSF, and the Templeton Foundation.
Just a quick info question. Were you able to control for color?
Of the park images, so we did look at hue and saturation and brightness, and we did not have significant correlations.
Because there are other findings from earlier work on environmental characteristics that have pointed to the effect of green.
In this set of analysis, we chose to focus on non-straight edges as a spatial property due to our prior research, but we could also do more analysis with colors.
That.
Yeah.
It would be really interesting to look to the overlap invariance or unique variance of these two features.
Yeah, I have our entire correlation matrix, and I can look at it and double check on hue and get back to you on that.
Why have you picked straight edges as opposed to the different proportionalities and different types of curvature? Only that straight edges are very unusual in most naturalistic situations.
So these are non-straight edges, which are normally they correlate highly with naturalness, and so most urban parks with trees and vegetation have high non-straight edges.
As does much of reality.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So you're looking at you're comparing a very large set with a very tiny subset that occurs in just a very limited number of conditions. And so I'm wondering why it might not, I'm wondering as a research question, why you might not look at different types of non-straight edges and compare those. I guess that's my point.
Oh, comparing different, comparing jagged edges to curved edges as
Or
subsets
different types of curved edges, perhaps.
Right. Right now, our algorithms don't separate curved, and it's just either they're curved and broken or they're straight. We haven't we don't have the algorithm that makes them into angular or curved as a subset of non-straight edges.
There's also a large biological literature on this as well you might be aware of.
Given that they're urban parks, obviously some of them might be more insulated in terms of the auditory soundscape that might be accompanying them. And I was wondering if you have any plans to use these journal entries to look at a discussion of the sounds that are either not present or present in these urban environments as a suggestion of whether it matters whether the park is removed in terms of sound from an auditory environment or not.
I think that's a really good point, and something that we could, you could do. You could actually go to each of these parks and record a soundscape and then compare them. I think that's a really good point.
Just to add to that, smell, right? Holistic sensory experience might be important to look at as well, and compare maybe winter landscape or winter visits with a summer visit or a spring.
Right. So for these entries right now, they're not. We don't have them dated that well. You can sometimes tell when they were written based on how the people what they say, but we don't have it coded in. But it would be interesting to see across because they are located in places with seasons to see across different parts of the year what sort of reflections you get.
You can tell from all the questions that your research is very stimulating. So I was also wondering, probably you've done this work with student populations?
The first study is just people who have visited the parks. We have no information on their demographics. This is all, the TKF Foundation requires each of their parks to have a journal. Okay. And so then we just got the data from them, and so it's anyone. You have entries in there from children who are, Jack, age 7, I love this park, and then you have these more reflective entries from adults that you see. The study 2 was a MTurk study, so it was done online, and so it's also not using a student population.
Because it would be interesting, if you can, to look at age as an interesting variable, possibly moderating.